gonna do, I'm just gonna run through and make sure, we're
You're good now.
yeah, we're good. So all I wanna do is run through and give you guys some examples on how we're going to take and tweak our basic cylinders that you guys have already been making and make them into something a little more curious, a little more interesting. I think a lot of you guys have already grasped the idea of the cylinder, and if you haven't, you're moving towards it really quickly. So what do we do afterwards? You know, we talked about the idea that centering is a setup for that cylinder making process. The cylinder is also going to be the setup for making some sort of form that's curious and interesting, which I really want you to explore. That's part of the fun of the process on the wheel, and I think that's the most enjoyable part. You don't want to just make tubes. It's like, what's the point of that? So I got a number of balls we're going to work our way through. These are about one and some change. Actually pretty small on the small side. The idea here is not that I want you guys to see how to make things that are really thin or really small. I just want you guys to understand how we can make interesting shapes and where we can push and pull things to take our core cylinder form and make it into something that's a little more visually curious and interesting. So. If you guys want to try working with some small balls, that's cool. You'll find that the smaller they are, the more difficult it is. Especially if you have big hands, they just get lost in your space. You kind of have to feel for what's going on. So I'm not going to discuss too much the idea of how we center.
Why did you use your sponge?
Because I can just add water to it right when I need it. Instead of having to stop. And I notice like, do this and this. When I need water, I just want to do it. So I'm going to move through the cylinder process kind of fast. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. We'll talk about the setup of it, but not going to break it down step by step. You guys have got this down pat. You've seen it over and over, and most of you are doing it. I'm using sponge. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'm using the side of my finger to make the pull. It's a little bit better than this because, you know, it's like the transition we made from here to 3 o'clock to going here more relaxed. This for me is not relaxed. You really have to force the wrist. This is really relaxed because I can shorten. I'm stronger, I'm closer to it, it's closer to my wrist where I have strength. And so instead of being fingers out, I bring it in. So once we get our basic form pulled, as far as the height of the cylinder, the width that we want, in this case we're going to start with something that's really kind of a rudimentary kind of basic form. Nothing wild, nothing crazy. Sure, it functions as a cup, it's got that basic shape, it's that kind of cylinder, coffee cup form, but what else can you do with it? Where else can we take it? So I'm going to set my lip. I'm going to make a nice, clean drinking lip, something that's got a little bit of a edge to it, nothing too fat and too round, and this piece is a little bit on the thin side anyway. Now you guys should have in your toolkit a kind of basic set of tools. Just a little simple, basic round rib. Now after I'm done throwing, I want to kind of dry the surface off. I want it relatively dry. I'm not putting water everywhere. The more water you add, the more it's going to soften up, the more it's going to want to move and flop all over. You notice I got to my cylinder rather quickly. Not because I'm trying to be really fast with it, but I want to get it there with as little exposure to water as possible. So that way the clay still has a lot of life in it, a lot of workability. It hasn't been saturated, it's not squishy, it's not soft. So at a thin state, getting there quickly, the clay has a lot of workability left. It's not, you don't blow on it and look at it the wrong way, it quivers, but it can really go wherever you want it to. You might say you can direct it to wherever you want it to go. So really simple form, you guys have seen me do it, is to make some scallops. I'm going to use the edge of this thing. We're just going to work in some shapes, some scallops into the side of the form. So we're going to go from basic cylinder to something that's got a little bit more curiosity. 2 hands always. My inside hand is at the very top edge, so it's at this point right here. It's helping me push into the rib and gives me a nice, clean, sharp line at the top. Let's go one little scallop. Same thing. Two little scallops. And the third little scallop went wee, wee, wee all the way home. So we go from something that's really just a straightforward kind of basic cylinder, and we start to tweak it. We have some nice ridges. Again, it's going to start adding that tactile quality to the hand. You know, when you hold it, it's going to feel stimulating. When you look at it visually, it's going to have a conversational point. You want to make these objects for engagement. You want to have something that's fun to look at, fun to use. It makes for a special kind of intimate experience with the cup. Rather than, it's the paper cup. It's like that basic cup from the convenience store. It's the styrofoam cup. It functions, big deal. In the end, you don't think about it, you throw it away. But as makers and creators of things that are unique and special, you should take the time to design, to play, and to engineer something that is going to have a lasting and hopefully a profound impact on the person who uses it. I'm going to undercut a little bit more. I want to have a nice clean foot, make it a little bit easier for me to trim in the end. I want to get rid of as much material as I can on the wheel now. Saves the process so I can also recycle and re-wedge all the scraps that I cut off now instead of waiting till they're leather hard and trim scraps and then have to basically give them away to our recycle bucket. So move from simple form to something kind of unique and fun. So I'm going to cut this one off. We'll keep this. You guys remember the steps? We've got a little bit of a notch underneath. Put a little bit of water in the front of it. Clean water is best. It has a tendency to flow underneath the piece much easier. If you use a lot of slip and slurry, it's not as fluid. So when you drag the wire underneath, it has a tendency to kind of stay put. It's like trying to drag mud versus drag a nice kind of clean fluid water. Thumbs down, pull it across. Quite often, one time is enough. You might need to, there, it's starting to move. You start getting the hanger and then go, just give a little tug. Remember, add a little bit of water to your wear board. Don't have to make it sopping wet, just drag your sponge on it. I like to do this so that way when we put the piece on the board, you can slide it into position and really use up the real estate. You don't want to put it right in the corner here and it's basically a big wear board and you got one cup on it. You know, I only got one bag and you're trying to stretch them around. Try to be efficient with your use of space. I'm just going to slide this guy off. Underneath, at the very bottom, we don't want to touch the side. We'll wind up denting it, especially if we did any really nice design work. Touch the bottom. If we dent up the bottom or make some, marks on the bottom, big deal. We're going to trim those anyway. We're going to trim that area. So this is the area you want to handle. It's also the firmest and most resilient on the pot. I'm going to slide it off on my hand. Slide it onto the wear board since the wear board's nice and wet. I can slide it in and I got room for potentially 1, 2, 3 more. Make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, let's see where we go. Let's expand this a little bit more. I clean the wheel off. Don't mind me